Thank you. Thank you for the invite, Zeb. Always good to emerge from the garden and reflect a little bit on where we've got to and where we've been and share that with all you guys. And great to follow on from Jessie, who's been a very wonderful ally of us on our journey. So yeah, feels appropriate to be next to you, so it's good. All right, so the subject that I was offered was local food systems, and I thought perhaps the best way to go into that realm is to just share my story a bit, because the last 15 years I've basically been applying myself to the local food system and trying to figure out how to make a livelihood doing that. So that's how long I've been in this area. I arrived in Wanaka, about 15 years ago, and I had been travelling the country, going to permaculture things, spent like 2 years basically woofing around New Zealand and going to the hui's and kind of visiting and staying with the kind of permaculture leaders at the time, and learning a lot. I had before that been in policy, environmental policy at the Ministry for the Environment, and so had made a sharp decision to like change direction, and was very unskilled in those realms of primary production, but that was where I wanted to head. So woofing was a really great pathway into that. And so I arrived in Wanaka full of ideals and a little bit of skill from those 2 years of learning, but not really. What I arrived here with was a very strong kind of purpose and realization that there weren't pathways for people like me who had all the permaculture and terra aquaculture and all these big ideals, but there weren't pathways beyond becoming a teacher in that field. Like, there weren't really pathways visible to me of how to proceed and how to make a living doing primary production in a way that was aligned. So anyway, that was what I wanted to do. So I sort of just set about trying to create that for myself. So I just this morning just skimmed through the permaculture principles, just to sort of reflect. I think a lot of my journey, you'll see some of these kind of in it. So I'm just going to say them now, just as a little kind of thing to think about as I'm sharing my journey. Small and slow solutions. That's one of the design principles. Creatively use and respond to change. Produce no waste and obtain a yield. Those are the four that to me really stuck out as the ones that most relate to what I've done. And I was thinking about who spoke yesterday evening, where is she? The lady from Manaki Whenua, Melissa, and talking about those levels of change. And I'm kind of a first principles type of person, and I like to say I wanted to apply myself at that deepest level, and but I'm only one person, or it's just me. Well, it's not now, but it was. And a quote that really stuck with me and has carried me through all of this was one from Richard St. Barbe Baker, who was the man of the trees. And if you don't know who he is, look him up. He was quite a pioneer in this part of the world. And his quote that has stuck with me is, "We have time, we grow like the trees." So that was very calming for me at that moment in my life, feeling this urgency and impatience and frustration. And I really held on to that, and I drew a little picture of a tree and that quote, and it sort of sat with me. And I found it like a week ago, and I was like, oh yeah, that, and it's true. So I'm going to just share my journey. So when I first arrived here, like I said, I wanted to make it a livelihood, not just a interest on the side in doing another job. I actually wanted this primary production and permaculture and all of those things to become my livelihood. So it started off, I just got a job at the local vineyard, Ripon. It's a biodynamic vineyard, and I was pruning and doing the harvest. And while I was doing the harvest, I looked across the fence, and there was like this whole avenue, 130. Oh look, there goes one right there. I think that's one. Oh, that's a horse chestnut. But anyway, there was 130 trees, mature, big trees like this, and chestnuts, and they were falling on the ground. Nothing was happening to them. What's that? Oh, sure. I thought you were saying something about me. I was like, what? And so I hadn't even eaten a chestnut at that point, but I got a handful, took them home, cooked them. So, oh wow, this is quite yummy. And it wasn't part of our food culture, but you know, a bit of Googling, oh right, it's a really big part of food culture around the world. And so, long story short, we approached the landowners and got permission to harvest their chestnuts. We hand harvested over a ton of chestnuts and washed them, racked them, put them in the chiller. We hired a flower grower's chiller, used their chiller to start with, and each individual nut we slit by hand, and Greg, my partner, made a beautiful chestnut roasting cart out of wood and recycled materials, and we went out on the streets in Wanaka and sold hot roasted chestnuts. So we took a product, like they sold us them on the ground for $1 a kilo because they weren't really valued, and we were able to turn them into a $35 a kilo product. So that's a lesson about value adding and finding like value in resources that aren't valued, I guess. Chestnuts are a really pre-industrial food all around the world. All the old countries, they were like the primary carbohydrate for the winter months, and then with the industrialization, like wheat took over and they became not a thing. But everybody in those old countries like has a sense of them and they love them, and like we would be standing on the cart. It's quite a polarizing experience. We'd have half the people who were tourists or had come from those older countries would come up to us and be like, oh, chestnuts, we love them. Oh, you know, we get this really emphatic, excited, moment. And then the other half were Kiwis who like didn't know at all what they were. And I was like, what is that? We'd give them a sample, and we, over the years, we had thousands of conversations with people about them and introduced this staple to thousands of people. So in the value adding side of that, also we would dress up in our costumes. We had like autumnal regalia, and Greg, if few of you know Greg, he's quite a charismatic yarner, and we would have many, many yarns with people about the value of tree crops and chestnuts. So that was a great journey. We did that for we're still doing it in some ways. So we probably did it seriously for 5 or 6 years as a side hustle. And then as our current project, Frogsong, has sort of grown, it's got less and less. But we also, another orchard we kind of knew of, we sort of had some involvement in the tree crop organisation or the movement. And it's generally, does everyone know tree crops? Yeah, so it's an organisation that's been around a bit longer, and it tends to be populated by sort of elderly types in New Zealand. It's sort of a dying organisation, I'd say, and the people in it are elderly usually and quite knowledgeable about trees. So if you have got a branch in your community that's still active, it's a really awesome resource. What's that? Yes, they are branches. Yeah. So we knew about another orchard on Mount Barker Road near the airport. It was a big walnut orchard, and the trees there also weren't really being harvested. A lot of these orchards are put in place by hobbyists they're not really industrial scale. They're the scale they're too small to be industrial, but really too big to harvest by hand, the whole thing. But our approach was, we'll just harvest by hand what we can, and we'll value add that product and see what we can do. So again, it was a bit of a side hustle, but with a really confidence gaining experience and learning of how taking a product to market can work and who your markets are and how that happens. So we got the walnuts. We started off doing them on the same cart, just with a different pan, and we would do honey roasted walnuts as a summer sort of hustle, and winter was the chestnuts. So anyway, I don't want to carry on too much about Village Nuts, but we are still doing it. If you go to FreshLink now, you'll see our activated walnuts in the bins at FreshLink. So again, really value-added product. So just to put in context why they cost so much, they are still hand harvested. We wash them and rack them to get rid of any bacteria and orchard microorganisms. And then we hand crank them with our little hand cranked cracker. And then Greg watches movies and separates the nut from the cracked shell at night in the winter or any time. And then once they've done that, I then soak them for 6 hours, and we rinse off the water and mix in cinnamon, salt and sugar, coconut sugar, and then they get dehydrated in a dehydrator for 24 hours. So a big process. And we sell them to these guys, and they retail for 12 something 100 grams, which is like a lot. And if you get the, you know, I think probably initially people were like, oh yum, and we get like a big bag, and then it'll be like $50, please, and you know, whoa. But yeah, it's been a really, also that's continued to be part of our like a side hustle that adds into our kind of main thing. So I guess the lesson about all of that I want to pull out is about finding resources in the community that aren't valued. And they're probably not valued. That particular example is because they don't fit the industrial model, but they may fit a handcrafted artisan model. The maple syrup is a good example of that also. And yeah, the hazelnut situation is the same. We do harvest about 100 kilos of hazelnuts a year. The best product you can make with that is hazelnut butter, which we do make for ourselves, but we haven't kind of spread that out yet. We have planted, we've planted a few hundred kilos of hazelnuts, and there is an orchard across the road from us, and yeah, we know a few orchards, so that maybe, but probably not. So yeah, value adding. You don't have to have land to do that sort of a project. Like I didn't have any land access at that time. We were just squatting on someone else's land, and yeah, there's opportunities out there. So if you're keen to start working in primary production, just explore and see what you can find. At the same time as all of that, I was investing in my own training and knowledge, and I did a training course with agribusiness, learning how to do pruning of orchard trees. And then the next season, or the same season actually, I started advertising to prune people's orchards, home orchards, lifestyle blocks, and that became a business side hustle again that I had for 10 years, and would just go to people's orchards and do the pruning. And yeah, I didn't have land, but there was an opportunity there to gain knowledge and skills regardless. And yeah, if you don't have access to land, just invest. I recommend just investing in your own knowledge and skills, because you never know where those opportunities will come beyond that. Yeah, so that happened. That was all that. And the next leg of the journey is about Frogsong Farm, which is where we are currently. A few of you came out and visited on Wednesday and probably have a good visual of what it is. But for those of you who weren't there, this is a family farm that my family invested in 7 years ago. And it's 20 acres, and we have a market garden amongst it, which is about just over half an acre in size and includes a newly erected greenhouse. So that's been a 5-year journey, I would say, from when we first landed there. It was sort of a home garden, and it has grown every year. But we sort of started selling stuff 5 years ago, I would say. And so I want to that business has had, the Frogsong Farm Market Garden has had quite a few different iterations, which sort of will tell you about different parts of the food system that we've explored. And every year we've sort of modified things and reacted and responded and grown. So I just want to run you through quickly what they were to give you a sense of the pros and cons of each part of the market and how that works. So just also the market garden is, if anyone's seen Curtis Stone or JM Fortier, their stuff online on YouTube, that's sort of what it is. We're a hybrid really between those two. I'm a student on JM Fortier's masterclass. I'm actually an ambassador for them. So if anyone is thinking about doing that course or wants to know more about it, you should come to me, and I can get you a 10% discount. And I'm a big advocate for doing that if you're serious about market gardening, because for me there's so many parts to this business, and that has given a very solid foundation to it. That's taken one big piece of the picture and taken care of it, so I can focus on all the rest. And so JM, they're in Quebec, and I think also Quebec is a very interesting place for us to look at when we're looking at food systems. I would say they're about 30 years ahead of us. And the Market Garden podcast that JM does, he has all sorts of people on there, including food activists who are working more in like your sort of space, but recommend that as well if you kind of want to know more. And I think you know, we have this illness in New Zealand of thinking we're like the best farmers in the world and that we're like the pioneer of everything. But actually, in this realm, we're followers, and we should, you know, take advantage of this whole, you know, the leaders who are out there who are 30 years ahead of us. There's a lot we can gain from doing that. So anyway, the first year that we started, it was farmers markets. Wanaka's always had like a kind of average farmers market situation. There's not really enough decent growers to like hold a proper market, and so then the customers are a bit patchy. But it is a really great place if you're wanting to have a go with a product, or, you know, produce something. Like, it's a very good place to start, because you kind of doesn't really matter if you're super consistent or not. You can just go, and sometimes you'll sell out, and that's great. But if it's just like a side hustle, it's a really good place to kind of explore and see what your customers are, what they want, who they are, all that kind of stuff. But I found that it wasn't really a serious livelihood, and it wasn't a very efficient model, in that, you know, we could spend the whole day harvesting and washing and packing all this stuff, and then like it might rain that day, and you go there and you know, you'd come home with like 3/4 of what you had prepared. So it's not really an efficient model, and also there's a lot of, as a market gardener, time is your most limited constraint, your time as the gardener, and there's a lot of time wasted at a market just standing there. You know, it's not a time efficient model, but it is great because you get to talk to your people and get to show people who you are and get to meet people. So I'd say it's a really good starting point. So we did that for a bit, we played around with that, and then COVID happened, and that stopped being a possibility. And I remember when that happened, me and Jessie, like, you were just starting Freshlink, or just about to, and we were on the phone, like, trying to figure out like how we could adapt to this and work it out. And that was sort of the beginning of like the next phase for us. And we got given, because we had been in existence already for a few years, had, you know, tax returns to show for it, we got given the subsidies, which was great. It was $15,000 between us to invest, which we did, and put it into our business, and like bought packaging equipment and printers and just all the stuff that we needed to take it to a more professional level, so that we could present our things through shops. And that's what we did. And we got onto the Open Food Network, which is another platform that is quite interesting in the local food movement. It's sort of an online platform that anyone can create an account on and like sell their products, and people can use you to do that. So we did that for a start. Customers would order, and then Greg would deliver. Not great in terms of consistency and knowing what orders were going to come and like what you should grow. So it's a little bit just working it out as you go. The next year we did veggie boxes, and that was when I signed up to the masterclass, because we had to sort of get serious about growing the whole range of vegetables, not just focusing on like salads and quick crops, but we needed to have the whole range of things to offer. And that was good, but again, not very efficient, and really admin heavy. We had to, you know, someone goes on holiday, you gotta find somewhere else to put their box, or someone doesn't like turnips or whatever it is, you know, like you have to sort of, there's a lot of micromanagement involved with that, but it is a good direct to consumer sale, so you're getting like the full value of what you've grown. But ultimately, when the next season we wanted to grow and expand what we're doing, that was just too admin heavy to do. So the last 2 seasons we've just been doing restaurants and chefs, and Freshlink and Soul Food. So Freshlink, and I think, takes about 1/3 of our kind of sales, and mostly that's salads, but also they've been really great in supporting us with whatever overflow we have. So I try to only grow what I think will actually be ordered, and there's no waste. And so Freshlink, just having a key person like Kate, who's the produce manager in there, who's obviously a great supporter of ours and keen, whatever I'd be like, can you take some carrots this week, or can you take some head lettuce? She'd be like, yep, you know, whatever. And somehow it all just worked out. So and we've been working with the restaurants and the cafes, which has been, I would say the pros of that is that makes you be really professional, because you're interacting with a business, and there's not really any scope for, you know, flaking out or anything like that. Like, you have to know that every delivery you can deliver what they will want. And so we have them all on standing orders, and then we're trying to like value add their standing orders with interesting products and things that kind of make it more exciting. But yeah, and then finally this season there's been a new market formed in Luggett, which is sort of breaking the trend of Wanaka markets and being actually really successful. And I think the secret to their success is that they're not trying to do it every week. They've just, last season they started it actually, and it was just once, it was a harvest market, which is the time of the year when all your long season stuff's ready, pumpkins, potatoes, onions, all the stuff that takes a whole season to grow. And it was huge, it was amazing. We went there and it was pumping, it was awesome. The only downer to that sort of a model is that it's on the weekend and we work all week quite intensively, and our daughter goes to school, and the weekend is actually quite precious for our family time. So that's not something we want to do regularly, but we've said to them that we'll do 2 to 3 a year. And it's been a great add-on, a really good opportunity for us to meet our customers and to get the full value again, like of some of these crops which are less, you know, I wouldn't want to sell potatoes through FreshLink or pumpkins because they're not like a high value product, they're quite a low value product. But if you can get the direct to customer price, then it makes it worthwhile. So, you know, we sort of planted potatoes and pumpkins and things knowing that that market would come and that we could turn up and have a really diverse offering that they couldn't usually get in the shops. So it's kind of special for that. And then finally, this season we introduced, we do living herbs and little plant fibre pots, and they're presenting them through FreshLink. Again, we had a huge plant sale in spring where we sell heirloom tomatoes, and we got our big greenhouse up and running and smashing out heirloom tomatoes for our chefs. So with all of that, it's actually finally, I feel like we've arrived in terms of our production system and our livelihood. In the market gardening world, they talk about a goal being 100k an acre, and we have we're about 150k an acre now, which is great. But knowing that's the gross, so you know that doesn't, obviously there's a lot of costs as well, but we have invested, you know, in terms of all our infrastructure, all the big pieces of infrastructure are now in place. And so more of that gross will be able to be spent on team members and not, and income, which would be great. So I guess what I'd say is that if you're thinking about doing this sort of a thing, be prepared for a 5-year at least window of heavy investment, and that's both in terms of time and grit and like sweat equity, but also like capital stuff like buying greenhouses and irrigation and wash pack stations and all of that. That's quite a big lump. And if you know, but there's probably ways, I hope there are ways. For us, we've been supported a lot by my family to get through those big investments, but once you're on the other side of it, there's a livelihood possibility there. And I think it's kind of exciting. You think about these giant farms, you know, like 100,000 acres or whatever it was, but you know, a family can make a livelihood on half an acre, really, if it's very intensively done. And it does require, like I said, that 5 years, and it requires a real focus and like refinement and skills and systems and being as efficient and productive as you possibly can. Like, it's not an easy way to make a living, but it's a really rewarding way. And I think that from now on we're focused on refining what we have and creating more flow and more ease and more support for me and us, and I feel like the future's looking pretty good. So in summary, I do have a few things. It's not a quick journey, it's a long journey to create a livelihood like what we have, but it's very rewarding. If you're thinking about it, gather your team. It's not an individual sport, it's a team sport. You need a strong team of people who have different strengths and abilities, and who want to support both financially but also in all sorts of ways. Invest in your knowledge and skills. Where we've got to is really a big part of that is investing in that masterclass and the years I've put in before where I am now to learn. And yeah, remember that we have time. We grow like the trees.